Hey guys, Oblivion 903 here once again, and welcome to the second edition of Flashback Friday. In this video I'm going to be looking back at another true classic, one that defined and set the standard for modern first person shooter games, 007's Goldeneye on the N64. And despite not expecting to do too well upon release, it went on to sell over 8 million copies, grossing an estimated $250 million worldwide, which made it the third best-selling N64 game, and as I said, it truly set the standard for modern first-person shooter games for reasons which I will go into a little bit later on. And when you take that into consideration, it's not too bad for a team of about 10 with little to no experience making games. The plot for Goldeneye generally follows that of the movie itself, despite being released 2 years after the movie. It follows James Bond and 00 agent Alec Trevelyan as they uncover a secret chemical weapons facility in Russia. Sadly, during the course of the mission, Alec is killed in action. Later on in the movie and game, James investigates an unscheduled missile test fire believed to be a cover-up for the launch of Goldeneye, which is a weapon capable of destroying any electronic circuit which would cause absolute havoc worldwide. And during the course of this investigation, however, though, James learns that his good friend Alec is in fact alive and well, but he has ultimately betrayed him, which makes him a 00 agent. Back to the game itself now. Goldeneye was originally pitched to be a side-scroller shooter on the SNES following successive games such as Donkey Kong. It was thankfully dropped though in favour of becoming an on-the-rails shooter similar to that of Virtual Cop on the Sega, and it was decided that this game was going to be developed for the then called Ultra 64, which later became the N64. And once again, thankfully that didn't happen, because if it did, Goldeneye would not have defined the genre and it would not have had the success, because at the time it was originally shown it wasn't expected to do very well, like most movie caching games are. A lot of the elements from the original on-the-rails version of the game did however make their way into the final version, such as limb targeting, causing certain limb hits to cause more damage than others, and enemies to react depending on those hit placements. This caused a lot of entertainment amongst gamers in the fact that you could do the nut shot, which they would hold themselves in pain, and also you could do it in reverse, so you could do it from behind, in which they would ultimately react to that as well. This is something that hadn't really been done before with shooters, except headshots, which had been done. Obviously a headshot usually means instant kill, and apart from that, the rest of the body generally did the same amount of damage in game. So this was the first where maybe the arm, it took a lot more shots to the arm itself to kill an enemy rather than say the chest. Another thing that is cool is also the fact that they have a hit radius, which basically means when a shot is fired, enemies within a certain area would be able to hear and react to it, and obviously if you shot more than once in a short period of time, the area would grow larger and there's more chance of sort of being discovered, because this game does have a lot of stealth elements to it. This can sort of cause, in a way, another sort of form of entertainment in the fact that you could shoot an enemy quite openly about it, and an enemy that's maybe a good few meters away from you would not react to it or have a clue that it's actually occurred. You can actually see that at this part of the video. As you can see, shooting the enemy down the stairs and the guy there is not reacting to it at all. Another feature that was thankfully dropped, but quite a revolutionary sort of idea, is to reload the gun, the player had to unplug the rumble pack that would have had to be in the gamepad. That sort of simulated reloading the actual gun. Thankfully though that was taken out, because that would have been so complicated, especially in some of the higher action parts of the game when you're trying to shoot enemies as quick as you can and you have to sort of realistically reload the gun. That would have caused real nuisance. Also, despite being an afterthought, and it was actually developed partly in secret because of fear of it being turned down or causing further delay to the game, the multiplayer aspect was only added a month before the final version was due to be released, and that was only because it was actually finished before it was revealed to anyone in the team. And the multiplayer aspect completely changed console first-person shooter multiplayer. Although deathmatch and other game modes existed prior, mainly in PC shooters, it really did set the standard for modern first-person shooter games, and the multiplayer aspect gained huge popularity. I myself spent many hours with friends playing these games. It was really enjoyable and was just so unreal and different compared to what other games were putting out at the time. And that sort of standard was not really surpassed until Halo came out on the original Xbox in 2001. Later on, a sequel was planned for this game, but it was ultimately cancelled because Rare lost the rights to James Bond to EA, who released the next game, Tomorrow Never Dies, which to be honest was pretty naff, especially when you compare it to Goldeneye, but in general it was just pretty naff overall. Rare then turned their potential plans into a completely new series which became Perfect Dark, and the game played very similar and I believe used the same engine, so ultimately it was very much the same sort of game. It included a lot of design elements from Goldeneye as well, and the Perfect Dark series did in itself have relative success. Perfect Dark itself did have a lot of sales. They sort of dwindled over time with the other games. Most recently there was Perfect Dark Zero, which was launched on the Xbox 360, which did have a pretty good success though, I've got to say. Over the years, especially in the last 5 or 6 years since the release of modern consoles such as the Xbox 360, there has been many rumours of Goldeneye being ported to the likes of the Xbox 360 and the PS3. And unfortunately though, that never happened because mainly Microsoft and Nintendo could not reach financial agreements in which to release the port, and also rights and licenses played a part in it, obviously with James Bond being its own massive franchise in itself. It was just too much of a hassle and just too complicated to get it to actually happen. Despite many years of gamers sort of protesting and demanding and just pleading for it to happen because it would have been an absolute great port, and one that, especially with the classic multiplayer aspects, if that was brought online it would have just been really popular, and it probably would still have a pretty good fan base even now. In 2013 though, it was finally said that it won't happen. This game made such an impact that despite it being actually 17 years now since it was released, gamers still want the original ported. Obviously the only option now is to buy a N64 or dig out your old one if any of you have it tucked away and buy a copy of it off eBay or something. Although a port was never released, in 2010 a full remake was released on the Wii and the Nintendo DS, and later followed by the 360 and PS3 versions. Starring Daniel Craig rather than Pierce Brosnan. Since Daniel Craig was the current Bond at the time, it followed a similar story, but some stuff was changed to suit the style of one series. Being released by Activision, it did play very similar to Call of Duty games, much like Quantum of Solace and other releases. But despite fairly positive reviews, it didn't live up to the success of the original, and like I said, Activision made it, and it just felt to me personally that it was a bit like a poor man's version of Call of Duty. It had so much potential to play. If it played exactly like it probably would have done a bit better, but it played like COD, but it wasn't COD. It felt like COD, but not quite there, you sort of get what I mean. So it wasn't bad. I'd say probably a solid 7 out of 10, but any higher than that, if you pushed it with 8, I think you would just be too generous. But not a bad game in itself, like I said. It did generally follow the same story, but things were mixed about a little bit. If you are interested, I'd probably say it's worth a play. Just don't expect it because it's Activision to play as solid as Call of Duty does. With all that being said, it is clear to see why this title is such a revolutionary classic, and one that truly did define the first person shooter genre, and for those reasons I just had to include it so early on in this series. And on that note, that concludes episode 2 of Flashback Friday. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please check out part 3 next week, which will be the fantastic Sega game Sonic the Hedgehog. And if you haven't already, check out part 1, the link is in the description below. And so you keep up to date with these videos and everything else, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And I will see you guys very soon. Until then, bye for now.